The Glendale Road Church of Christ proudly presents a weekly exploration of the Word of our living God. This is It Is Written with Minister Jason Hart.
Today is Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to all of our fathers and our grandfathers. To begin our lesson today, I want to ask just a couple of questions. Questions that should be important to us as fathers. I hope that throughout the lesson, though I am speaking to fathers that are mothers, as well as others who are not fathers, will be able to gain something that is important for your lives. But to begin with, fathers, I want to ask you a question. Is your home a happy home? That's not to ask if everything is all sunshine and rainbows at your house. As if everybody is cheery all the time. No, that's not what I mean by that. There's going to be some down times. There's going to be some sad moments. But generally in speaking, is your home a positive, happy home? Another question very similar to that is your home a healthy home? I'm not asking if it's gluten-free or if you refuse to have high fructose corn syrup in your pantry. I'm not asking that. Is it sound? Is the connection between you and your wife, that relationship between you and your children, is it where it should be? Now, those two questions, is your home a happy home? Is your home a healthy home? Anybody can have a happy and healthy home. Anybody can. With enough information, with the right kind of advice, with the right attitude, anybody can have a happy and healthy home. You don't even have to have God in the picture to find that. You can have a happy and healthy home without even having a belief in God. If you have the right advice, if you have all the right information, you can have a happy and healthy home. And sometimes perhaps that's what we're more concerned about, is having a happy and healthy home. Anybody can do that. You can look out into our world today. Individuals who could care less about going anywhere to worship God. And what do you find at their home? You can find a happy and healthy home. I'm not saying it is easy without God, certainly not. But anybody can have a happy and healthy home. So what should concern us more than anything is the more important question. Is your home a God-built home? Not that you did everything for your house and then invited God to come and be a part of it. But rather, did you ask God to be a part, to be the whole, to be the centerpiece before anything else? Did you invite Him into the sanctuary of your soul, of your heart, before anything else? Is He the foundation? Is He the centerpiece of everything within your family? Now, that does not automatically mean that you will have a happy and healthy home. But with full trust in God, for you and for your children, God can give you a happy and healthy home. I want to do something today that's a little bit uncharacteristic. something a little bit different that will carry throughout the lesson. How many of you remember the movie Field of Dreams? Go ahead, raise your hand. You don't have to feel embarrassed if you've seen the movie Field of Dreams. Came out in 1989, and today is considered the 25th anniversary of that film. In my opinion, it's one of the best films that was ever created. It's one of my favorites. That doesn't mean that I watch it every week. Probably about once a year I pull it out and watch Field of Dreams. Now there's some elements within the film that I would prefer not to be in there, such as certain words. But overall, I thoroughly enjoy the film. And folks, it's purely fictional. And you'll get that even if you haven't seen the movie, as we use it to be a catalyst within our lesson today. You'll recognize this is purely fictional. This is certainly nothing that could happen in real life. But also within that movie, we find lessons that are available for us. Basically, the lesson is about a man by the name of Ray Kinsella. He is played by Kevin Costner. One of the lines in the very beginning of the movie is Ray saying, "I am 36 years old. I love my family. I love baseball. And I'm about to become a farmer. And until I heard the voice, I'd never done a crazy thing in my life." Now that voice that he's talking about is sort of what sets the scene for the entire movie. Ray is out working in the cornfield when he hears this voice. "If you build, he will come." And he starts looking around, trying to figure out, where is this voice coming from? American Film Institute had made a list of the top 100 most memorable quotes of movies of all time. This was number 39. "If you build it, he will come." Out of curiosity, I went and checked their website to see, well, what were some of the more popular movie quotes? Quotes that came from Gone with the Wind, Casablanca, The Godfather, Star Wars. You know what number 40 was? Number 40 was, "Mama always said that life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get." From Forrest Gump. I guess if we wanted to, we could have fit that into a Father's Day lesson too, couldn't we? Because fathers, you understand as well as I do, being a father is like having a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get out of your kids. Sometimes you either want to give them to somebody else or eat them. Now I wonder, what was number 38? Number 38 came from the movie Pride of the Yankees, the Lou Gehrig story. And the quote from there was, "Today I consider myself to be the luckiest man upon the face of the earth." And I know there are some fathers here today that would say that of this day. If you build it, he will come. Kind of get the impression from the very beginning of the movie that as Ray begins to figure things out, that he knows exactly what all of this is about. And perhaps there are some times when we as fathers, we take a look at what it means to be a father, what it means to have a happy and healthy family, and we think that we have it all figured out. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is how I'm supposed to do it. I put a smile on my face, I hug my kids, and I've got it all figured out. God has some information available for us to take our minds off of having a happy and healthy family to creating within our homes a God-built family. If you would, please turn your Bibles over to Psalm chapter 127. Beginning in verse 1, let's look at the first two lines. "Unless the Lord builds the house, those who build it labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, in these next two lines, the watchman stays awake in vain. This particular psalm is, if you'll notice at the heading at the top, it says it is a psalm of ascents. There are about 12 to 15 psalms that are characterized as such, and they represent those psalms that were taught among families and among friends as they were making their journey into Jerusalem for the three great feast days. This was to help prepare their hearts and prepare their minds for what would take place in these feast days. And this is one of the songs of ascents. It is accredited to Solomon, but I somewhat wonder, was this not something that was passed down from his father, David? That this was information regarding making a family and sustaining and maintaining a family. And then the question comes to mind, why is this then a psalm of ascents? What does this have to do with worship? What does this have to do with the Jewish feast days? What was the very first system that God created? Family. It is of utmost concern to God that a family be built with Him in the picture. With Him to be the framework, for Him to be the canvas, for Him to be the medium, for Him to be the paint. God can build your family. If you resort to your own devices, and they're not all bad, if you resort to nothing but self-help books, which can be good, and they can be helpful, they're very helpful tools. If you rely upon your own devices to have a happy and healthy family, God says you're laboring in vain. So why not do what makes sense and allow God to build the family? Bring God into the picture and see what you get. And have faith in it. God can also protect the family. Look outside several homes all around our community and you see these little blue signs, these octagon blue signs. They're to alert people that this house has an alarm system. Don't mess with us. Some fathers resort to other means of protection. I don't have a problem with that. We have locks on our doors. We have garage door openers to be able to go from the street into the house without ever seeing a person. We have many ways of protecting our families. Yes, fathers can be so zealous about their children that they can be quite physical in their desire to protect their children. But God says, you try to do that on your own, then you're doing it in vain. And why is that? Because God knows what works. How does He know what works for the family? How does He know how to build? Because He's God. Because He's the author of it. He's the father of it. Deuteronomy chapter 29 and verse 29 tells us that there are secret things that belong to God. There are some things that we just cannot fully understand. We cannot fully know. They're for God alone. But the things which have been revealed to us, His instructions within the Word of God, they've been given to us and to our children, that we might walk according to the words of this law. God gives us the instructions. He gives us the help aid that we need as fathers to be able to build our home and to be able to protect our homes. God knows. Matthew chapter 7 and verse 11, Jesus said, "If you, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more does the Father who is in heaven know how to give good gifts to those who ask of Him?" Father knows how to give gifts to His children because the Father knows. Hebrews chapter 12, making a comparison between the correction that a father gives a child and the correction that the Father of heaven gives to His children. It's God knows because He is the great Father. One of the things that's interesting about the movie is that moving along through the movie, you think that Ray has it all figured out and he has all of this information, he has all of the right the resource to figure out what all of these voices are trying to tell him. I don't want to be a spoiler, but I will say that what Ray thought was true, what Ray thought was right, ended up not being the case at the end of the movie. Fathers, we may think we know what is right about having a happy and a healthy family. But if we build our house in cooperation with the Lord, we will provide a home for Him to reside. Not with our own devices, but with what God gives us as information. The second voice that Ray heard in the field was, "Ease his pain." Trying to figure this out, he finally decided this is about a man by the name of Terrence Mann, who was never able to see Ebbetsfield. Terrence Mann was supposed to be, I guess you might say, a voice of reason or protest, depending on your point of view, from back in the 60s. He was considered a leader of his time, but then he just sort of faded away and became a children's computer programmer. Finally went and convinced Terrence Mann to come and to spend some time with him. And he just knew that's what it was. This was to ease his pain. When we look at the character of God in the Bible, we see an individual, we see a personality that is never without rest, or that never rests. And we see at the very beginning of the Bible that on the seventh day He rested. That means that He stopped. He stopped creating. He stopped developing. And why? Because everything was good. He just stopped. Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 28 tells us that God never grows weary. He never becomes faint. Because it is impossible for Him to be able to tire. In 2 Chronicles chapter 16 and verse 9 tells us that His eyes go to and fro throughout the entire earth to give strong support for those whose hearts are toward Him. Looking into Psalm chapter 127 and verse 2, this is what the psalmist wrote. Notice he talks about two fathers here. "It is in vain that you rise up early and go late to rest, eating the bread of anxious toil, for He gives His beloved sleep." The first three lines of verse 2 emphasize the father who wakes up very early in the morning and goes to bed late at night. He's anxious about providing for his family. And fathers, I can assure you, I understand, and I think we all understand that our desire is to care for our family and provide for them the best. And And times we want to help give them the luxuries of life. We get that. We understand that. But we also stress ourselves out over it, don't we? Always make sure that our children have exactly what they need, what they want, and sometimes what they need and what they don't want. And we work aimlessly at it, though, don't we? Anxious. Yeah, God says all of that anxiety, all of that pent-up stress that you're worried about, it's all in vain. It's all useless. And why? Because of the next line. Look at the last line in verse 2. For He gives to His beloved sleep. He gives sleep, He gives rest to whom? His beloved. Those who have a love and a trust and faith in God, they find rest. It doesn't mean that they stop working. But it does mean, as we read in 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 7, their complete trust in God as they cast their anxieties upon God rather than upon themselves. And they find rest. They find contentment, knowing that God will always provide. It's not going to be as if God just waved His hand and your family has all the food and all the shelter and all the clothes that they need. But God can provide the opportunities if we have faith and trust to be able to provide for our families. And in that we can have faith, in that we can have contentment. Again, Ray thought that ease his pain was about Terrence. Because he had never been to Ebbets Field, that he would have the chance now just to go and wander off into the cornfield. Something that Ray wished he would have been able to do. Fathers, we have an awful lot of anxiety, an awful lot of stress, and we consider our economy today, which is still far better than most of the world around us. You know what God is trying to get us to understand about Him? That we, the keepers of the home, the leaders of the home, need to learn to lean upon Him, to love Him, and cast our anxiety, our cares, our worries upon Him. He can bear it. He's anxiously looking for all of us to do that. One other voice came to Ray. It's go the distance. And once again, Ray thought that he had it all figured out. This is about Archibald Moonlight Graham, a young man who stepped into the major leagues for one game and never had the chance to stand at the plate. Now, in order for him to find this Moonlight Graham, Ray had to go to Chisholm, Minnesota. He had to go the distance. But it wasn't just that. Archibald Graham was dead. He and Terrence went on the journey, and they went searching newspaper articles and talking to people that knew Moonlight Graham. And they just couldn't figure it out. So eventually they were driving home. They pick up a young man. He hops into the van and he says he's a baseball player. His name is Archie Graham. I told you the movie's fictional. Once again, Ray thought, go the distance. Oh, this is about Archie. This is about Moonlight Graham, a young man who had a chance to be in the major leagues and only played one game and never had the chance to bat. Let's go back to Psalm 127. Verses 3 through 5. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, the fruit of the womb, a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior are the children of one's youth. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. He shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. Notice what the psalmist says at the very beginning of verse 3. He says, children are a heritage from the Lord. They're not a hindrance. They're not a burden. They are a blessing. Children are a blessing from the Lord. And the second thing he says, they are the fruit of the womb, a reward, like arrows in the hand of a warrior. When does a warrior have the greatest influence of his arrow? After it struck its object? He has the greatest influence of his arrow as he holds it within his hand. Fathers, our greatest influence in our children's lives are when we have them within our grasp. Before we send them off to school, before we send them off to college, before we send them off into the world, the greatest influence that we have as fathers is when they are within our hands. Now, I realize that we have a lot of different individuals that can help, tools. They can be able to help influence our children. There are teachers, there are coaches. We have an outstanding youth minister right here at Glendale. Someone who I have the utmost respect and confidence in. I would trust my children with Nick and Meredith any day of the week under any circumstance. But as much as I love Nick, as much as confidence as I have in him, you know what? He is not my children's father. The greatest spiritual influence for their life should come from this guy. Not him, not anybody else. Doesn't mean that they cannot find wise advice or wisdom from others or influence from others. I want you to be an influence on my children for the positive. But I want to be their guiding influence in all things spiritual in this life. And the psalmist tells us, your quiver can be full of them. Blessed is the man who fills his quiver with them. It says, he shall not be put to shame when he speaks with his enemies in the gate. The gate in Israel, at the cities, that was the place where justice occurred. The cities of refuge. When an individual escaped or was trying to escape the hands of the avenger of blood, they would be tried at the gates by the elders of the city to determine whether that individual could enter into the city or not. And one of the things that Solomon seems to be pointing out here to us is that you may be the best father in the world. You may build your home upon God, with God in it, with God as its foundation, as the centerpiece. And there's still going to be problems from without. People are going to make accusations about you. People are going to judge you. And you will have enemies around the world. In the very least, antagonists. But if you build your home with God in it, if you influence your children, your role as a father will never come against you. In that regard, you will be respected. So Ray thought that going the distance was about Archie. There was a line within the movie as Ray was talking to Moonlight Graham. He said, for 50 years ago, for 5 minutes, you came this close. It would kill some men to get that close to their dream and not to be able to touch it. They'd consider it to be a tragedy. And that's when Doc Graham said, son, if I'd only gotten to be a doctor for 5 minutes, now that would have been a tragedy. Guys, I look back at my life and I think I had some dreams. I had some ambitions, some things that I would have liked to have done, what I thought would have been pretty cool to do. But then along came these three. And all of that changed. And I agree with Doc. If I'd only gotten to be a father for just 5 minutes, now that would have been a tragedy. Fathers who go the distance for their children discover blessings without limits. And that's because God wants to bless your life. He doesn't give us all of the information in the world because He needs it, but because He wants to see fathers to succeed. Toward the end of the movie, and I told you I hate to do this, but I'm going to be a spoiler. Ray was talking to the one whom he thought that he was supposed to build the field to, Shoeless Joe Jackson. He looked at him and said, what are you staring at, you ghost? He looked at Ray and said, if you build it. He sort of grinned and then pointed back towards home plate. He will come. Ever since he was 14 years old, Ray had been estranged and separated from his father. One of the last conversations that they had was his father asking him to play catch. It wasn't long after that they went their separate ways. They never saw one another again. If you build it, He will come. And Ray starts thinking, go the distance. Ease his pain. Standing at home plate was his father, John Kinsella. They talked for a little bit, and just as his father is about to walk away, he says, Dad, want to have a catch? The movie closes with them throwing baseball back and forth. Building it, easing his pain, and going the distance was about Ray. I remember growing up, there were a lot of things that I did with my dad. And of the memories that I can recall, as much as I loved soccer, I don't remember many times kicking the ball around with Daddy. He couldn't really kick a soccer ball very well, but he could throw a baseball. And I remember in that old home that we used to live in, not the house where they live now, out on Mike Road, right off the Lake Highway, Daddy would take a big yellow bucket filled with baseballs. I'd stand out there with a bat and he'd just throw ball after ball after ball. And today, Dad, I want to ask you want to play catch? You built our home with God in it. You taught me to trust in more than money. And you showed me how to go the distance. I sure am glad you caught that. Happy Father's Day. He fills his quiver with children. He's not talking about quantity of kids, but with kids that he can have influence over. He will be blessed wherever he goes. He will have an influence in this life, even beyond his family and into the world. God doesn't direct fathers for his benefit, but he directs fathers to benefit their lives. Fathers, I hope you all have a wonderful Father's Day. I hope that you will have moments, and it may not include a baseball, but I hope that you will have moments that will be remembered by your children years from today, years from now. That they can think back, if anything, just to recall the time that you set aside for them. That you would have taught them to build a home with God as its centerpiece. That life is not all about money. It's about family. It's about God as the centerpiece. And always go the distance for your children. The invitation of the Lord is open for anybody, for any reason, and we invite you to call upon the church for help, for prayers, whatever the case may be. And if you need the prayers of the church, would you please come while we stand and sing?
This has been It Is Written, presented by the Glendale Road Church of Christ. We welcome your visits and communications at any time.
With God's own heart, oh, let the ancient